Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Data Dudes with Cellular Labs. So my name is Nhan. I'm the current CEO of Cellular Labs, and this is James Tuxbury. Hello, James.
Hello.
So I wanted to record this video, and we'll do a more series like this going forward. But James and I, like to sit around and discuss about Amazon, working with Amazon, and how difficult Amazon data is. And so I wanted to shift that discussion online so everybody can kind of get a glimpse onto kind of what challenges we deal with. So this is kind of a series where we dive into some of the challenges working with Amazon and how we deal with those challenges, as well as we won't get into too deep technical parts, but we do get into some technicals. So before we begin, I wanted to kind of get a feel for who you are, James, and who I am, so that the audience knows our background. James, can you start with us? Like, how long you've been working with Amazon data, and how did you get started with that?
Okay, yeah, sure. So like Nan said, I'm James. I've been working with Nhan in one form or another since 2015. And basically since back then we've been working on different Amazon things. And so basically, been working on with some version of Amazon SP API or going back to MWS since back then.
Yep, awesome. Yeah, so as you guys may know, I'm Nandin. I'm the CEO of Cellular Labs currently, but also I'm CEO of A Power Equipment, which is an e-commerce company that still sells on Amazon. And A Power Equipment is currently a seven-figure, but we got to eight-figure sales on Amazon at one point. And throughout the journey, we had to develop our own software to manage our own inventory management system and our whole operation. And that's where James and I have been working together for all these years to build those software. And now we're taking those skill sets and applying at Cellular Labs. So that's kind of the background that we're both coming from. So we've had, I've had over 10 years, and James at this point is almost 10 years working
hmm
with Amazon data. So lots of interesting stuff. So I wanted to shift focus and talk about, okay, what are some of the major challenges in working with Amazon data? Starting with the documentation. What have you experienced in that aspect, James?
Yeah, so we've run into obviously, quite a few challenges over the years in varying forms. But yeah, like you were just alluding to, the one of the issues that we've had is inconsistent or at times wrong documentation, where there's either stuff missing or the documentation tells you to do something one way, and then actually you end up having to do some other thing to get it to work.
Yep.
So yeah,
And
that
you
that
spent
that's
countless hours troubleshooting those problems, right? So
yes.
tell
So
everybody, like, what was one of the next token thing that you have to deal with?
yeah, so that's a great example of one issue that we came across at one point, which was, the documentation tells us that the way most of the calls work is sometimes can have multiple pages of results, and when that's the case, the Amazon includes a next token value, which is just a bunch of, it's a string, it's just a bunch of characters basically, and you're supposed to use that in order to get the next page of results, and you keep going until you run out of pages. Basically that's what it boils down to. But at one point with this SP API, they had some issue where all the requests were bringing back next token like tokens and telling you, hey, there's a next page of data, even if there was no actual next page of data.
And
So
that broke our
that's
software.
that's just one example. So now we have to build. In that particular moment, we had to build. Amazon has since fixed that issue, but if you're, we're using this thing live. So if you're relying on this, you gotta fix it in the moment. And
Right.
so then now you're finding yourself building a additional logic that you shouldn't have to build. Of
Yeah.
like, okay, so call the next token, and if it actually has values, then do stuff. If it doesn't, then handle it differently.
Yeah. And
So
Amazon
that's
doesn't always fix those bugs that you're talking about. They can take hours and hours to
correct.
fix, right?
Yeah, right.
Another
So
example you talked about was I think like the enum values
yes.
documentation.
Yeah, that's one that's currently still a problem because it's in the orders API specifically. And there's a particular enum in the documentation that if you look at the docs today, you'll see that it says that it expects two values, or it can be two values. But so far in practice, we've had up to 10 different values come through that same thing that's supposed to only have two possible options. And the documentation, just doesn't reflect the other possible options. So the only way to really deal with it is obviously we can open a case, and we have, but that takes months at times to get
Yeah.
things resolved, if not years, if ever.
Yeah.
So but outside of that, the only way to really deal with it is wait for it to break, and then when it does, fix it. And,
Yeah.
and again, we end up in the same place where we're building infrastructure to fix. It's stuff that we shouldn't have to build, but
Yeah.
you have to do it, otherwise the whole thing crashes down. So
That's right.
you have to handle what we call failing gracefully in situations like this. Make sure that you handle a situation where things don't go as expected.
So
Uh,
basically, to sum it up, one of the challenges, major challenges working at Amazon is just wrong documentation or inconsistent documentation. So you should test everything and not rely on the documentation that they provide, right?
yeah, yes. So I will say that their current documentation is better than what they had for MWS, so I'll give them that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, of course. So, as a dev, you want to rely on the documentation as the source of truth, but sometimes the stuff isn't 100% exact.
Yeah.
So, it's a little give and take there, but yeah, I
So
think
I
that.
wanted to touch on another point of one of the challenges working on the data was like the migration from MWS to SPA API. So give us like a 10 seconds explanation of what is MWS and what is the SPA API that they migrated to.
Right. So on a super top level view, basically both of these things are two different systems for talking to Amazon. That's what it boils down to. You request, you say, hey, I want this information, and then Amazon gives it to you. Is basically the idea here. The major difference between MWS and SP API is MWS is SOAP, and which we can hold on to that term for just a moment, and the SP API is a REST API. And on a technical level, not to get too deep into the technical weeds, but SOAP is an XML-based system and REST is a JSON-based system, and that's the
So
the key difference here.
it's just
Uh,
basically a different format. So this is XML format, and JSON is the new format that most of the internet is built on these modern days. This was a system built in 2009, right?
yeah, so there's there are basically two different ways of representing data, right? And your point there that you just said about the internet nowadays, yes, a lot of modern stuff is built REST, and JSON is basically the way that uh, most of the internet nowadays passes information back and forth. So it makes things easier. Of course, both systems have some upsides and some downsides, but JSON or REST API is very much adopted uh, across the internet, and it's used a lot. So, but yeah, it makes things easier if everything you're doing is in JSON, and then you're not having to convert things from one to the other and all that sort of
Yeah.
technical mumbo jumbo.
So bottom line is the MWS API was rolled out in 2009. The world has changed a lot since then, and
Hmm.
Amazon switched to the SP API, which they rolled out in 2022. And they deprecated means like they no longer support uh, uh, MWS API after March 31st, 2024, and everything's shifted over to the SP API or Selling Partner API, which uses more modern language, right? So that's the other challenges working with Amazon data is because like there's the different APIs, you got to know the quirks of Amazon, right? The last thing I wanted to touch on was like, does Amazon give you ample time to work on your changes when they make these kind of changes?
Yeah, so they have basically, in the past, we've definitely seen examples of Amazon changing things and giving us very short runways, or even uh, getting an announcement that's, hey, this change is coming, and then you should look at the date, and the date's 2 days ago,
Hmm.
and and so yeah, so we do a lot of times get heads up, but sometimes we don't to certain changes with massive changes like this SP API migration. Obviously, they definitely gave heads up of how those things are working out, and gave us long runaways on those sorts of things. But that's not always the case with working with Amazon, or if things change in the API. A related example is they'll change something in the API, and then there's no announcement that it changed, and then you
Yeah.
open the case and you say, hey, this thing over here changed, and then Amazon says, no, it didn't. It's always been like that. It's like it's
Yeah.
not, because I built a whole system that worked off of it, and now it changed.
Yeah. Or they
So we
add or change column names without notice, and then
yeah,
change it
that
back
that's
without notice too.
That's a big. I think sometimes in those cases, it may be someone accidentally let something go a little early that they weren't supposed to on the
Yeah.
Amazon end. But yeah, we have seen examples of that as well. A column name change or something like that that just was unexpected, and we just kind of have to deal with it and build infrastructure to, like I said before, fail gracefully and
Yeah.
not blow up when those sorts of things happen.
And most of these things we find out because our systems break, right? And then we have to go
Right.
looking into why did it break, and then we find out these things. All right, that's a good introduction into who James is, who I am, and kind of what kind of challenges we working with Amazon API in the future. We'll talk about some of the things we're dealing with that. But I wanted for this episode, that's a great introduction. Thank you, James. All right,
Thank you.
have a good one. See you.